Imagine a world ruled by tribal chaos, where blood feuds last generations and the weak have no protector. Now imagine one man standing alone, claiming to speak on behalf of the creator of the universe, challenging kings, idols, and traditions that ruled for centuries. This is infection. This is the beginning of Islam, and it changed the world forever. In this episode, we'll go back over 1,400 years to a small city in the Arabian desert called Mecca. At the time, it was a thriving trade hub, full of wealth, culture, but also superstition, social injustice, and deep divisions between the rich and poor. Arabia had no unified religion, no centralized government, and no written laws. Power was everything, and your tribe was your only safety. Slavery was common, women were often treated as property, and the gods worshipped were many, over 300 idols surrounded the Kaaba itself. But amid all this, a man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah, a humble orphan known for his honesty, would receive a message that would challenge the very fabric of Arabian life, and within just 2 decades would unite the entire peninsula under one belief. So how did the message spread? Who followed him? And how did the Quraysh, his own tribe, become his fiercest enemies? Today we dive into the early years of Islam, from the first revelation to the growing resistance, and the moment this spiritual call turned into a movement. Welcome to Knowledge Channel, where we bring history to life and dive deep into the event that shaped our world. I am Muhammad, and today we're taking you on a journey through the early days of Islam, not just as a religion, but as a movement that shocked the foundations of the Arabian society. If you are new here, do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode, especially with what we've got coming next. The Arabian Peninsula before Islam was a harsh, fragmented world. Mecca, though the center of trade, was the city ruled by tribal elites, especially the Quraysh. Wealthy merchants controlled the economy, religious pilgrims brought income, and over 360 idols were housed in the Kaaba. It was a society of extremes. On one side, you had tribal leaders draped in silk with gold and slaves. On the other, poor workers and outcasts who lived in hunger and fear. Women had almost no rights. Newborn girls were sometimes buried alive to avoid shame. Slavery was rampant. Vengeance ruled over law. In the middle of this chaos, a child was born into the Quraysh, an orphan named Muhammad. When the message of Islam first came down, it did not echo across mountain tops. It wasn't shouted in the streets. It began quietly, in a house, in a heart, in a whisper between those who believed in just one God, but in Muhammad. Khadijah, the first believer, the very first to believe, wasn't a warrior. It wasn't a scholar. It was a woman, his wife, Khadijah. She believed him when he doubted himself. She held him when he trembled from the weight of revelation. She spent her wealth, her influence, her life, not for the fame, but for faith. Without Khadijah, there may not have been an Islam. This is not an exaggeration. It's a truth every early historian recognized. Then came a child, a boy not older than 10, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin, who grew up under the Prophet's care, saw his character every day. When Muhammad invited him to Islam, Ali did not say, "I'm too young," or "let me ask my father." He said, "This is the truth. Why wait?" The same Ali would later become the 4th Khalifa and one of Islam's greatest heroes. But back then he was just a boy who believed early and stood firm when others ran. Next was Zayd ibn Haritha, a freed slave adopted by Muhammad. He had the chance to return to his biological father, but he chose to stay with Muhammad. He wasn't just loyal, he was among the earliest to pray, to memorize verses, to defend the Prophet. Islam wasn't spread by people seeking reward. It was embraced by people who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And then came Abu Bakr, a man of wealth, status, and respect in Mecca's society. When he heard the message, he did not debate. He did not ask for a miracle. He believed immediately, and then he used his influence to bring others. Osman ibn Affan, the noble businessman, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, the generous trader, Talha ibn Ubaidullah and Zubair ibn Awam, both young, brave, and later counted among the 10 promised paradise. These weren't just names, they were the backbone of a movement that the world thought would die in silence. Being among the first Muslims wasn't a badge of honor in Mecca, it was a death sentence. They were mocked, beaten, boycotted, and imprisoned. Some had their homes destroyed, others were tortured for sport. But what's incredible is not just that they stayed, it's they grew stronger. They recited verses in secret, prayed in hidden courtyards, and every time a new believer joined, it was like fire that couldn't be put out. Islam wasn't spreading because of wealth or swords. It was spreading because people looked at the Prophet and saw a man who told the truth. When truth begins to rise, falsehood does not just sit and watch, it fights back. And in Mecca, those who held power, the Quraysh, had everything to lose if Islam spread: honor, wealth, control. So they moved from silence to suppression. At first they mocked him, they called him names: crazy, poet. They laughed when he preached, they rolled their eyes when he spoke about one God and day of judgment. But the Prophet kept speaking, people kept listening, and the Quraysh started to worry. Islam wasn't just a spiritual message, it was a threat to the social order. In a society built on tribal pride, Islam came with words like, "You are all equal before God. No Arab is better than non-Arab. Free the slaves, help the poor, stop the injustice." This wasn't just a religion, this was a revolution. The Quraysh couldn't silence Muhammad. He had the protection of his uncle Abu Talib, so they turned their anger toward the weakest believers: slaves, servants, the poor. They dragged them in the streets, burned their back with hot stones, starved them, beat them, and in the middle of that hell stood a woman, Sumayya bint Khuwaylid. She was tied to the desert ground. Her body broke, but not her faith. She was the first martyr in Islam, a woman who died saying, "La ilaha illallah." Imagine the Prophet walking through Mecca, seeing Bilal, his close companion, lashed under the burning sun, forced to lie in backstones. But Bilal did not scream, he did not beg, he kept saying, "Ahad, Ahad, one, one." And each time he said it, the chains on his soul shattered a little more. Quraysh even tried to negotiate. They sent Utbah ibn Rabi'ah with an offer: "We will make you a king, we will give you a woman, give you gold, just stop preaching." The Prophet did not blink. He replied with verses from the Quran so powerful that Utbah returned pale shaken. He told his people, "I've never heard words like this. This is not a poetry. It's something else entirely." Even they felt its power, they just couldn't accept it. When torture did not work, Quraysh turned to politics. They pressured Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle and protector, either stop Muhammad or give him up to us. Abu Talib, thought-ward and aging, refused to surrender his nephew. He went to Muhammad and said, "Spare me and yourself, do not burden me beyond what I can bear." And the Prophet replied with words that shook his heart: "O uncle, even if they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I would not leave this mission." What started as insults had now turned into torture, and what began as quiet belief had now become a movement too strong to crush. Quraysh thought they could stamp it out with pain, but instead they lit a fire in the heart of believers that no whip, no bride, no threat could ever extinguish. When violence failed and bribes were rejected, Quraysh tried something even darker. They didn't just target the Prophet, they targeted everyone who protected him, even if they weren't Muslim. They thought if we can't break Muhammad, maybe we can break his tribe. And so began the boycott. The leaders of Quraysh gathered in Dar al-Nadwa, Mecca's council hall. They drafted a pact, a cruel one. It said no one will marry from the family of Banu Hashim. No one will buy from them. No one will sell to them. No one will visit them, sit with them, speak to them until they hand over Muhammad. They wrote it down, sealed it, hung it inside the Kaaba as if it were sacred, but what they were doing was anything but. Banu Hashim, the Prophet's family and clan, were forced out of Mecca into a dry valley called Shiʿb Abi Talib. It wasn't just the Prophet or the believers, even those who did not follow Islam but supported him like Abu Talib were exiled too. They lived in heat, hunger, silence. Food became so rare, they tied stones on their stomachs just to sleep. Children cried themselves to exhaustion. Mothers chewed on dry leather just to feel something in their mouths. The Prophet, despite everything, kept preaching. At night, he would still teach, still comfort, still believe. Not all of Quraysh were monsters. A few quietly brought food at night, smuggled water, hid sacks of grain near the valley's edge. Among them was Hisham ibn Amr, who defied the boycott at great personal risk. The quiet act of kindness were sparks of light in a time of deep darkness. The boycott lasted 3 full years, 3 years of silence, suffering, and slow starving. Some believers died from the hunger. Some children never recovered from the pain. But Quraysh's plan backfired. Instead of isolating the Prophet, they revealed just how far he and his followers would go for their belief. Islam wasn't just growing, it was proving itself in blood, tears, and patience. Finally, some of Quraysh's decent hearts could not take it anymore. 5 men from different clans and others stood up. They marched to the Kaaba, ripped the boycott agreement down, and declared, "This injustice ends now." When they opened the scroll, they found that it had been eaten by insects, except for the word in your name, Allah, a sign that the Prophet said that God had already destroyed their cruelty before man did. The boycott was over, but the damage was done. Soon after, the Prophet lost 2 of his strongest supporters, Khadijah, the love of his life, and Abu Talib, his protective uncle. Within weeks, both were gone, and the Prophet, now alone, grieving and exposed, was about to face the most painful year of his life. The year of sorrow was coming. And that was the price of belief in the earliest days of Islam. Hunger, torture, exile, death, and yet not a single heart turned back. These weren't just stories of pain. They were proofs of something deeper, a message worth sacrificing everything for. But the storm wasn't over. In fact, the Prophet was about to enter the darkest chapter of his life. In the next episode, we will take you into the year of sorrow, when the 2 pillars holding up the Prophet's word collapsed, when grief, rejection, and heartbreak brought him to the brink. And yet, from the pain came one of the most beautiful and miraculous events in Islamic history. We will also explore how the Prophet tried to find a new home in the city called Ta'if and was stoned by its people, and how, in the middle of that disappear, he was lifted, body and soul, to the heavens in the miraculous night journey, Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, a moment that turned sorrow into divine reassurance. If this journey moved you, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share the episode. This is Muhammad, and this is the Knowledge Channel, where history breathes and stories matter. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and never stop seeking the truth.